A big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. If you need a website or a domain, go to squarespace.com/James for 10% off your first purchase. So, in the past couple of years, maybe a bit longer, but certainly the past couple of years, I have turned down the vast majority of opportunities I've had to test out new camera equipment. Cameras, lenses, it's mostly it. And the reason for that is that I care very little about most cameras and lenses. I've noticed in myself, fairly recently I suppose, a correlation, and maybe this is quite common, but a correlation between the intensity of my obsession with taking photos, which at the moment is at an all-time high, and at the same time how little I tend to care about cameras when that's the case. And I should say that the reverse seems to be true. If I've had days where I really struggle to take photos, if I'm not feeling inspired, if I'm really struggling to get the results that I want, my interest in cameras seems to go up. Because my brain says, oh James, maybe it's the camera. Maybe you'd feel massively inspired if you got something new. But that hasn't been the case recently, which is why I'm surprised, shocked really, that I'm sat here today about to tell you about my new camera when 2 weeks ago that would have felt unfathomable. But here we are. So, long story short, a couple of weeks back I was on a beach, local beach close to where I live, and I was shooting, and there was another photographer there. We got chatting. He asked me if I'd ever tried the camera that he was using. I said no. He said, would you like to try this? I said yes, stupidly. And the problem with me saying yes is that I got a feeling holding that camera that I haven't had since, well, since I held this for the first time, the Lumix G9, which long time viewers of this channel will know is probably my favourite camera ever. Predominantly because of how it feels in my hand. It seems to fit like a glove, which I think is a really underrated thing as a camera. Most people buy cameras online now for completely understandable reasons, but if you hold this camera all day, or any camera all day, it's important that it feels like it fits. And yeah, for whatever reason, this feels like it does. We've all got different hands, so different cameras will give us this feeling. But for me, the G9 was the pinnacle of this. Anyway, long story short, for newer viewers of this channel, I stopped using the G9 because I needed more reliable video autofocus. Obviously, I've got a YouTube channel and I tend to work quite quickly, which means it's advantageous to me to have a camera that can shoot video and stills reliably all the time. That I think is quite a niche request, despite the fact that manufacturers these days insist on making every camera a hybrid camera. But then again, people like me do benefit from that. Anyway, because of the video autofocus thing, I switched to Sony and eventually to the Sony a7R V. And as I've mentioned a lot recently, this is a camera that has really grown on me throughout the course of my ownership with it over the past couple of years and shooting around the world with it. It's very reliable, shoots wonderful stills, amazing video, but it doesn't make me feel like this camera makes me feel when I hold this camera. And that wasn't a problem until I found another camera a couple of weeks ago that does make me feel like holding this camera. This is a Fujifilm GFX 100S2. Camera names aren't getting any more compelling, are they? But yeah, this camera, like the G9, fits in my hand for whatever reason like a glove. And for that, I love it. Now, I would like to think that I'm not quite as stupid as I look or sound. Perhaps I am, but no, I didn't buy a camera based on 2 minutes with someone else's on a local beach. Fujifilm offer a brilliant service here in the UK. I don't know if it's the case in other countries, but basically you can borrow a camera for free for a couple of days. They'll send it to your house and then they'll collect it from you. And I did that, and after that couple of days I decided that yeah, I was going to buy this camera. And in this video I'll explain some of the reasons why, alongside the fact that it fits like a glove. Yeah, but here are some photos first that I've shot with it in the past couple of weeks. And also, actually, it won't shock you to hear that I've bought the 50mm to go with it. 50 is a 40 in full frame terms, so obviously I was going to buy it. But look at this lens hood. Look how tiny that is. That's brilliant. So unless you were asleep through that little montage, you'll have noticed something that all of those photos have in common. Correct, the letterbox crop, otherwise known as 65 by 24, otherwise known as the X-Pan crop. Now, story time. Just over a year ago, the last time I was in Antarctica when we were running one of our workshops, Adam Gibbs, who's a fantastic photographer, brilliant guy, I'm sure many of you know him, I'll link to him in the description if you don't, but he was giving a presentation running through some of the photos that he had taken on that trip. And if you know Adam's work, you won't be surprised to hear that the photos he was showing were fantastic. But many of the photos he was showing us employed this crop, 65 by 24, letterbox crop, X-Pan crop, and I was really struck by the power of lots of the photos he was showing. And if you've heard people in the past talk about this crop, often they'll say things like, it's cinematic, which I hate as a word. I think it's a ridiculously ubiquitous mess, the term cinematic. What does that mean? But what got me about these photos was not that they looked cinematic, it's the power of leaving things out of the frame and how much you can leave out the frame when you shoot in this crop. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? But I was really struck by it looking at some of Adam's work. And I've talked a lot on this channel in the past about how one of my aims when I'm taking photos is to try and take photos about things, not just of things. And to me, the way I define that is that I want to leave viewers with more questions about a scene than answers. And if you're leaving things out of the frame by using this crop, then it strikes me that this crop is actually quite a powerful tool. And so through the course of the past year, I have been experimenting, mostly in private, with this crop. I've not really shared anything with this crop because I've been trying to work out what I really think of it. But I've had to do so in retrospect for the most part because my Sony cannot display those crop lines. I mean, I suppose I could just put tape on my screen or something, but it's not ideal. So yeah, I've had to crop sort of after the fact, which has been fine, but I have been intrigued about being able to use this crop out in the field. Now, last summer, Hasselblad gave me, and it seems like anyone who has a YouTube presence or an Instagram presence, they gave me an X2D in exchange for a video, in my case. And that camera was perfect for this kind of crop. It had an X-Pan crop built into the brilliant menu, which made it very easy to flip between different crop modes. But I decided to sell that camera. And the reason I really reluctantly decided to sell it was that it didn't fit my workflow because it didn't shoot video. And I've spoken already about the importance of that to me. And after months of trying to jam it into my process, the camera just wasn't working for me because I have this niche requirement. But this does shoot video, and this does shoot 65 by 24. In sort of an annoying way, you need to turn on JPEGs for it to show you the frame lines. I don't know why you can't just shoot RAW and get the frame lines while you're only shooting RAW. So now I have to record lots of JPEGs that I immediately throw away. Seems daft. But yeah, this camera can shoot great video and it can show me the frame lines of 65 by 24, which I'm super excited about experimenting with. Also, you might be able to see I've already debadged this camera, as I have with my Sony, with a Sharpie. I hate logos, if you're new to this channel. Despise logos. And you might be thinking that's a mad thing to do, but it comes off very easily with rubbing alcohol, so it's not really permanent. So, fits in my hand like a glove, tick. Can shoot 65 by 24, tick. Can shoot video, tick. Let's talk about weight. So if you look at these cameras side by side, you would think that they were a different product type. The Sony is so much smaller, it looks like a toy up against this. Before I first picked this up, I thought there's no way I would want to shoot with this because it looks like it's twice the size. But the reality I found after a couple of days of shooting with this is that it feels like I've got a camera in my hand when I'm walking around carrying it in much the same way that the Sony feels like I've got a camera in my hand. The size and weight difference doesn't seem in any way consequential to me. And I was surprised by that, and perhaps in part at least, it's because this camera fits my hand so well. Maybe that negates some of the weight and the size. But yeah, in the real world, there doesn't actually seem to be much of a difference between holding these two cameras for an extended period of time, to me at least. And I was very surprised by that, and in some ways annoyed by it, because it was another reason that perhaps I should get this camera. Another thing I was annoyed to find with this camera is that you don't, in my experience, need a tripod to benefit from the 102 megapixels. Lots of reviews that I'd read about this camera, and indeed the Hasselblad X2D, suggested that you're better off using a tripod to make the most of the resolution. That hasn't been my experience at all. Now, admittedly, I don't use things like ND filters. I shoot mostly in bright daylight, so I am shooting in favourable conditions for handheld shooting. But I've not had a single problem, and I put it down to incredible image stabilisation in this and indeed the Hasselblad X2D. And I do often think to myself that there are lots of people who use a tripod because that's their preference. It slows them down, they don't have to hold the camera, and that's fine. But I also think there's lots of people who shoot with a tripod because they feel they always need to shoot with a tripod. And I think if they've got a new camera that's got modern stabilisation, they might be pleasantly surprised to notice that in many cases now, you don't actually need a tripod when you think you might. Obviously, there are people who have medical conditions and reasons that they can't hold a camera steady, I get that. But for lots of people who don't have that, you might be pleasantly surprised to find that even with 100 megapixels, you can get perfectly sharp photos handheld in a range of conditions. Now that said, it doesn't change the fact that 100 megapixels is ridiculous and overkill for the vast majority of people, myself included. I put myself very much in that bracket. What does appeal to me though about the 100 megapixels is, again going back to 65 by 24, I can shoot 65 by 24 and still capture 50 megapixel files in that crop. And that means if I'm serious about experimenting with this crop, I can use that crop and still get massive files. And then of course, if I decide to sell those files as massive prints, I can do so knowing that the detail is going to be off the charts, despite the fact that I've chopped out loads and loads of resolution. It's amazing. So yes, there we go. I'm very surprised that this is my new camera. I didn't expect to have a new camera. And I absolutely didn't expect that if I was to buy a Fuji, this would be the one I would buy. I was holding out for the X Pro 4, and had the X Pro 4 come out, maybe I thought that was the one that might tempt me. But yeah, here we are. I should also say that alongside this 50 that I've got, the 40mm equivalent, I also bought the kit lens, which only cost about £300 more when you buy the body. It's a 35-70, which is a, what's that, 28-60, 28-59, something like that, full frame equivalent. And yeah, it's tiny. I mean, you do have to extend it to use it, but I just think that's brilliant design. And it's very, very, very sharp from FA onwards, which is what I shoot at, particularly when you're shooting medium format. So yeah, this brilliant lens will be my secondary lens, but I'm hoping to keep the 50 on for most of the time. And yeah, very pleased with the setup. And I don't know what it is that makes a camera fun to use. But, you know, people talk about Fujifilm cameras being fun all the time. And if you look at an X-T5 and it's got a dial for shutter speed and a dial for ISO, I don't think that's what makes a camera fun. And if you look at any Fuji camera that's got all the stuff for JPEG recipes, I'm not sure that's what makes a camera fun. So I don't know what makes a camera fun. But this camera, it is fun. I don't know why. Maybe it's the crop modes. Not sure. But a big thank you for watching, and thank you also to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. Now, I've had my Squarespace website for 7 or 8 years now, and it is integral to my business. It's where I sell my books, my presets, it's where I show my portfolio, it's where I send my newsletters from, and it's where I show my gear with my affiliate links. And actually, I've just updated my gear page. Couldn't have been simpler. It's all drag and drop, very simple to use. You don't need to know a single line of code. And I think as a photographer, having your own website, somewhere that you control entirely, that you can show your work online, is fantastic. And if you fancy having a website of your own to showcase your work, you can go to squarespace.com to start a free trial. And after that, if you'd like to make a purchase, just go to squarespace.com/James to get 10% off that first purchase. And a giant thank you to Squarespace for their continued support of this channel. And thank you to you for watching. Next time, I'll be out with a camera, probably the Fuji GFX 100 S2. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.